percentage pruning, I don't have that figure at hand. I know in the coming year forecast, we across all the blocks, there are pruning operations in all of them. It's an ongoing.
Sure. Like, is it our aim to prune everything, or is there a certain balance between what we prune and what we don't?
The balance is dependent on the ability to gain value from an increased log price. So the last time I toured the forests with our consultant, he was indicating the areas which they are letting not be pruned on account of self pruning and the way they are planted versus other blocks that where pruning is anticipated to realise some value due to a higher grade log.
Right. The reason for the question, I was reading an article in the last week, and I think it was a market report on various primary exports, and in logging they were talking about China, the demand for pruned timber prospects look far better than for non-pruned, and there was a few reasons given for that, and I didn't keep it, so I can't quote anything, but that was the reason for the question. Also, you mentioned the eucalypts. Are we replanting with eucalypts, or are we replanting those areas with something else?
I believe we're replanting entirely in pine. That's what the budgets indicate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's probably just it's a hangover. It's a legacy hangover.
Yeah, sure.
And also just on the pruning, we're to a certain extent we're married to the strategy when those forests were originally planted as well, in terms of the density and the care taken over that time.
Okay, well, I think it's a good thing, and even with the current employment situation, there's another good reason for it too.
It's an interesting comment about the Chinese have, as I understand, have typically been a larger buyer of the cheaper grade wood because they buy it for obviously engineered products and lower grades, and some of the higher grade timber we keep New Zealand side for processing, and that to a certain extent has evened out, has provided some price stability because we're not 100% dependent on export into China. We've got some ability to process here. So that's an interesting comment that China. Yeah.
Sure. The point was that there seemed to be a change of emphasis.
That is,
China.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Councillor Keast, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Cromer. I noted that you said, Ashby, that the pre-spray was delayed, pre-planting spray was delayed. Does that cause us any issues further on? Will we get the right balance between knocking the weeds down before they take hold, so make it an easier job and give the plants a good start, or is that will we be able to catch that up?
They also have a post-plant spraying operation, as I understand. I think the main issue is just getting through the. It's just the volume of work. I don't believe there's an issue in relation to the I guess the time lag between spraying and planting. Yeah.
All right, happy with that, Councillor Keast?
Yeah, it's probably an area where the pre-spray needs to be done so we get the plants in the ground at the right time. But they'll be managing that, no doubt.
Yep, it's always got a domino effect, hasn't it? If there's one delay, it has that domino effect for sure. Councillor Scott, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the carbon credits. I see we're sitting on about $2.8 million worth there. Like, how does that sort of work? As in ongoing, like, what's the sort of a level to keep that at before we trade those off, or is there any kind of planning around that sort of things, or do we just sort of build them up and wait and see?
I'm afraid I probably don't have a lot of information around our carbon credit strategy going forward. I do note the returns are completed. We've received the credits. I'm not sure if Matt has any greater understanding on the carbon credit strategy, but otherwise I can seek to come back to that with some comments.
Yeah, thanks, Ashby. We have discussed this previously, but Matt, I see you had your hand raised, so if you want to make a comment, it'd be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, my comment was really just going to be that we don't have a strategy to either use or expend, or it's almost just been an ongoing accumulation over the years based on the portfolio that we have. There has been discussion about whether or not to utilise them previously, but my understanding is the decision's been made to retain them for the time being, particularly given that indications were over particularly recent years that the value of the credits would continue to increase in view of the I think there's a $25 cap also likely to be lifted, and with the value again to continue to increase. So it's really been to this point a ride the wave type approach, but certainly yeah, worthwhile discussion, and perhaps when we're positioned to do so, to drive a strategy and determine how best to utilise those or manage those, retain them or otherwise.
Thanks, Matt. I think that part of the discussions when we do get back together, we've talked about peeling back the layers and looking at all our level of services and internally as well. And I think that should form part of that strategy discussion at that time, so that we can develop a very good strategy for those carbon credits. Any further comments? If so, or questions, just raise your hand. Councillor, sorry, Mayor Tong. Mayor Tong?
Yeah, sorry. Ashby, just in regards to Minister Jones's comments over the last 6 months, who's keeping an eye on that? Is it up to us to keep an eye on it, or are you keeping an eye on what his direction is around putting levies on forest owners and ensuring the domestic market is catered for before it goes overseas, all that sort of stuff? I know that he's put a cabinet paper forward, but I must admit I haven't looked into that over the last few weeks, but I understand that was gathering legs. So do you keep an eye on what's happening there?
Personally, yes. I'm aware of those comments. They seem to be stemming from a desire to protect marginal processes, particularly in north, marginal processes of wood, particularly in Northland. But in terms of how we act on those comments, I haven't specifically raised that with our consultant. But that's a really good comment that I will do next time I speak with them.
So just following up on that, Ashby, you'll provide us with an answer on that before we meet again, just so that we're aware of what that means.
In terms of Minister Jones?
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, did you wave your hand?
No, I'm all good at the end.
Okay. I think we've had a good discussion there, so I'll call that discussion to an end, and I'll move that that we received a report. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Harper. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you for that, Ashby. Appreciate that. So the next item is 7.2, Service Asset Program Report, which is on page 23 of your agenda. Nick Hamlin, would you like to speak to your report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Just before I go into the report, I thought I'd give a little bit of an overview of what's been happening, obviously, under the lockdown and what the service and asset team have actually done during that period. So, as you'll all be aware, all projects were suspended, other than I think there was one bridge project which we completed just due to safety, but all other projects were effectively stood down and made safe. So that was the first part of work. We then put quite a few plans in place around what we would do if we needed to start any project up, whether there was a major issue or whether there was a major issue with any piece of service or asset that we needed to get out under level 4 and replace. So that was in place, but we really didn't have to use any of that during that level 4 lockdown. Obviously, during that time, we updated all the health and safety systems as the information come through from government. It was quite a changing feast depending on which week and what was sent out. But the overall, the industry, including the civil industry, have done a really good job of actually pulling a lot of the new health and safety systems together to work under level 3 and level 2. So SDC staff, including Terry, have done a great job of actually disseminating all that into a new system to ensure that we could actually start under level 3. Also, the major effect during the lockdown and obviously the work that now has started is around the contracts that were in place. A number of us have been working on that in the background, and we've also sought legal advice in regards to what the event means and what the risks are. So we have a risk assessment in place, and we also have a procedure that we're developing in place in regards to reviewing claims as they come in and ensuring that we're aligned with what the industry is saying and also our partners and other local governments. During the lockdown as well, we carried out a review of some of the work that was falling into 2021, as well as the current works in 19 and 20. There was a lot of work done in the water team in regards to updating as-built work that was typically not able or was behind where it should have been. So there was good use of resources during the level 4 lockdown. Obviously, under level 3 now, we have all major works that was happening before lockdown is now underway in level 3, which is really good. At the moment, we haven't seen too many issues with dealing with the COVID-19 requirements, the distancing. The contractor has done a really good job to get themselves up to speed and to be able to operate on those levels. At the moment, it looks like they're operating reasonably efficiently, which is good. We're currently undertaking a review of the 19-20 projects and what effect COVID-19 is actually going to have and the delays are going to have in regards to the works program. There's absolutely going to be some effect, but there's still a lot of work that's obviously only really dropped out 4 weeks, which will still be completed in the 19-20 year. But I'll have a greater update on that for the next report for council once we see the exact effect of what that move will be. We obviously also didn't award some contracts prior to the level 4 lockdown just because we didn't want to expose risk where we've awarded a contract which contractors could then no longer actually uptake. So there was a couple of contracts that were held until such time that we could be confident that we could actually start them. In regards to the report itself, obviously before the works were shut down, the main packages of work that were underway was the road rehabs. They are nearly complete, or 2 of them are nearly complete, so they've only got a little amount of time left to do that. Bridge replacement packages, a lot of design work continued on during that phase, but obviously we couldn't do any construction, but that is now kicked off. The TNL pump line was stood down, but that is now back underway and will be completed in the next month or so. The Aotearoa water main, again, it was stood down, but it is back underway and will be completed in the 19-20 year at this point. And the replacement of the roof at the tower building is actually underway as we speak. Quite a good opportunity while we don't have staff in the building as well. And there's also been some work undertaken and started on the Stewart Island infrastructure, which Brendan will talk on later on. Apologies, I'm just grabbing all my pieces of paper in front of me. And we also have a number of major projects. We're really sitting right on the cusp of starting quite a major package of work. Obviously, the Te Anau wastewater, the two major projects there are a large commitment pending for SDC, so that's going to take up a reasonable amount of those 19, 20 and 2021 budgets. The Te Anau water main replacement is the contract's been awarded and we are waiting to start that. The Ethel Railway project, another smaller project, the contract has been awarded and awaiting start. And we actually, during the lockdown, we've actually had a number of projects out to tender as well, including the regional footpath replacements, the first package of that, and then there's another package being reviewed and developed into the package ready to go. We also intend to start the wastewater on fencing very shortly as well, as soon as we're allowed to travel a little bit more regionally than what we are now under level 3. So that's an overview of where the Service and Assets Works program's at. As I said, I will give a wider update on the actual total effect of the dollars that are likely to move from 1920 to 2021 in the next report.
Thank you, Nick. It's good to get the additional feedback as to what's been happening under Code 19, which is appreciated, and it's good to hear that things are still happening, tenders are still being put out there, and there's still some progress. And the other good aspect is that as the level of 4 down to 3 and hopefully down to 2 very soon, we're back into action, so that's good to hear. And it will be very interesting to see the future report with regards to the actual implication of Code 19, what effect it has on our work program and also our finances as well, because that will take a bit of a knock at the same time, I'm sure. I'll open up for questions, and the first one I see is Councillor Harper and then Councillor Menzies.
Yep, good, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Nick, with the advent of COVID-19 and the serious decline in tourist activity, particularly overseas, many of these projects will be able to be readjusted, I guess. We are, as we all know, doing current projects, which will obviously have to keep going. But I was just looking at some of these other projects that maybe it's going to be 4 years at least before we get back up to speed to what we were only 6 weeks ago. So maybe there might be an opportunity for us there to just to readjust the necessity of some of these projects to be done in the immediate future, and that could tail out some of our expenditure and spread it over a couple of years.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Look, absolutely. As I touched on, a key part of what we're doing now is reviewing all those projects. There is a number in there that were obviously tourism driven, and that will have a major effect. So, you know, there's going to be a consultation required with the councillors and community boards around the priority of some of those projects. But I'd likely think that a key focus over the coming years will be those critical infrastructural projects. And the tourism projects will obviously be on a case-by-case basis once we've had that consultation.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Menzies, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is just around the comment in the report that some of the projects require budgeted expenditure reports to be approved by the community boards. And the reports were ready, but then the lockdown occurred. There is still ability, I would understand, for approval for those because the community boards can meet through the Zoom technology. So I wouldn't like to see this projects being delayed because the boards aren't meeting, or it has to wait to the next official meeting. Because I think in this day and age, we need to focus on being nimble, and if we've got the technology to do it, can we use it?
Thank you, Councillor Menzies. I see Mr. Russell, you had your hand up. Would you like to make a comment?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, Councillor Menzies, we wholeheartedly agree, and this is just on the back of the previous community board meetings being cancelled. What we've done in a bid to be agile and nimble, to use your term, we've agreed those unbudgeted expenditure reports with each of the board chairs, and we've got a couple of them today on our agenda in a bid to keep the projects moving. And certainly moving forward, if there are others that need to be approved, we can, as you say, look to establish some short-term extraordinary meetings in order to get those the necessary approvals and keep things moving. So that's certainly a focus for us, is maintaining the existing works program and meeting our committed timelines.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Russell. It's good to hear, and good to see that progress continues. The next person I had was Councillor Ford, and then Councillor Douglas. So, Councillor Ford.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 31, there is mention of the Piano Airport Part 139 approvals, and I surmise we're using that for crayfish. And where do we stand as far as licensing and with that 139, please?
Do we still have Ashby on the line? I'll get Ashby to answer that. He's been involved with the airport works.
So I believe the question was where we stand with Part 139 certification for the airport.
That's correct.
That certification is still current, and we've made changes recently to budgets to strip out some of the nice to haves in relation to that airport, but while still maintaining the critical aspects necessary for maintaining Part 139. So, for example, we're exploring not going ahead with certain aspects of security fencing or other other aspects that came about as a result of the safety management systems process that we've had to implement as part of 139. But we are still maintaining the core aspects, which is that safety management system, and various training, and just so that we don't lose that certification. And did that answer the question?
Yeah, partly, and thank you. The concern I had was the fencing. I'm not too fussed about, as long as these crayfish aircraft can come and go. And if the weather's a bit crappy, well, they need to have sufficient navigational aids or whatever it might be. So
okay.
Don't want to be stuck with a load of that stuff and no transport.
Absolutely. And so we've early on we made steps to provide authorization for our operations manager to receive those flights on an ad hoc basis, and that's ongoing. There hasn't been there's a handful of flights actually over the last week or so that have left for those crayfish exports, and I don't believe there's been any interruption in that service, and that's been managed. That was occurring through lockdown as well as into level 3.
Yep, thank you very much. And of course, that's just a reflection of the shortage of air transport in general. We need to be up and ready to use it. But, that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Douglas, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was more of a comment on the Athol Railway project. This is a project that's been on the books for quite a number of years. It's involved negotiations with LINZ, Ngāi Tahu, and even the Historic Places Trust. So it just involves laying a section of line in the street parallel to the state highway, and we've got a couple of wagons going to be placed on that. So it's good to see this one coming to fruition.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas. That's good. Just to follow up on Council Ford's comments with the Manapōuri-Te Airport, it is good to see that the airport operating, and specifically with export as well. So once again, it's helping our economy to see those sort of those actions happening at the airport, and it's good to see our crayfish business back up and running. So they were closed for a while, so it's good to see that that business getting back into it. So it's pretty good news. Are there any other questions or comments that any councillors would like to make? Councillor Duffy.
Oh, just a question regarding that security fencing. I presume there must have been some perceived reason for that to have been put forward in the first place, or was it just sort of a preventative project? And if we're not putting that up, I mean, is there a need to have some sort of security camera arrangement or something? Just as, I mean, what was the reason that the security fencing was put up in the first place? Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. I do know the answer, but I see Ashby, he's keen to follow up on that, so I'll hand it over to Ashby.
It was just quickly, it was contemplating future development, and so there's still a need for some fencing, but at a much reduced scope from what was allowed for. The other aspect with that is it's a risk-weighted decision as well. Obviously, the more air traffic there is, and security fencing is just one aspect of some changes to the budget, but it's a risk-weighted decision, and what I mean by that is obviously the amount of air traffic increases risk in certain areas, and so while addressing those risks may be more critical with more air traffic under the current situation, they turn to nice to haves, and so we can put a hold on some of that spending in the short term.
Yeah, so I think one of the, oh, sorry, Councillor Duffy.
Well, it wasn't really a vandalism concern.
No.
Okay.
No, I think one of the key aspects that Ashley touched on was future development, potential development, and they had some initial plans that had been drawn up with regards to potential hangars, and ensuring that there's security between the airport itself and any of those other developments such as hangars. So it was the security of those sort of aspects.
Okay.
Right. Any other? There being no further questions or comments, would somebody like to move that we receive this report? If so, Councillor Scott, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Owen, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ashby, for that report. We now go to item 7.3, which is the Downer Water wastewater maintenance contract. It's on page 35. Bill Witham, I see Bill, you've clicked on. So Bill, would you like to speak to your report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the report that would have gone up to the last Services and Assets meeting before lockdown, but there were more pressing matters to squeeze into the agenda, so it was bumped. Downers haven't been able to really do a proper report through level 4, working from home. But for the next meeting, we'll be back to the familiar format that they have been producing. But we've been very busy through the lockdown, maintaining the critical services. So that was largely around the welfare of the operators on site. So there's been extensive work done by Downer nationally and locally to develop revised standard operating procedures and protocols for accessing our sites, just to keep those operators safe. We didn't quite have to go the lengths some of the other cities have gone to, where they had operators in camper vans actually living at the water treatment plants, but we certainly had a higher level of protection afforded those guys. So largely that contract has come through unscathed, as it was essential services they worked through. There's a few areas where we will incur some additional cost, particularly around reseals. The Ashford plants were closed for the duration, so they had to do temporary reinstatements using cold mix, and they'll have to go back and dig that out and do it properly. So that's a reasonable variation. Also, there'll be some PPE costs, but overall they're considered minor, considering the size of the contract. Pretty minor costs as a result of this COVID time that we're working our way through. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Witham, for your report. Just noticed that looking at some of the photos that were included in the report and the blockages with the material that's come through the system, and I'm sure that's an ongoing problem that we have with the materials that are being flushed through. What sort of education program do we have for our community to try and assist in these sort of things reoccurring?
So we put a newsletter out at least once a year into the first edition, and nationally we contribute to the Water NZ's campaign. They put out quite a good campaign every year. There's been a real push actually recently during the lockdown to try and educate people on not flushing wet wipes, because it's the last thing we need is that kind of avoidable work, especially under level 4.
And that sort of work is also costly as well. It's not just avoidable, but there's a cost associated with it, and it takes up the staff's time as well. So
absolutely.
It's really about, so if it's once a year, maybe there's an opportunity to rethink our education program for our ratepayers, and maybe we need to have a rethink about that.
Yeah, I'll make sure it is, whether it is once a year, Louise may remember, but there's a standard reminder that we're obliged to put in by the Ministry of Health around plumbo solvencies, so running your tap in the mornings before you drink, that kind of thing. And we also put this wet wipe thing in, but I've just got a feeling the wet wipe's only once or twice a year. Yeah. It's
the old added concept, isn't it? If you advertise it enough and you do it often enough, people start hearing it, believing it, and really get acknowledgement of it. So maybe there's a need just to have a look at that sort of campaign. See, Councillor Douglas, are you wishing to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Bill, yeah, very good. Yeah, great to see those photos. What's the one in Hamlin Street, Riverton, illegal penetration, the sewer network? Is somebody drilled a hole in the top to drain water away? What am I seeing there?
That's exactly what they've done, yeah. So they've got some surface water on their property, and they have drilled a hole in a pipe. It's not actually a council main, it's their neighbour's lateral, effectively.
And what did we say to this particular perpetrator?
So they've had a letter written to them. There were some other circumstances around there that and there was some privacy, and there's some privacy issues around that. So I've talked to Mayor Gary around this issue, so he's been briefed, and he's satisfied with our response to date, but there's some more work to be done on that issue. It's not straightforward.
Okay, no, appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Menzies? Okay, Councillor Keast and also, yeah, okay, Councillor Menzies. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment around the health and safety. I don't know, again, that was where someone was struck on the jaw by an angry ratepayer.
Yes.
Was that followed up with police, or we have a zero tolerance, I presume, towards such incidents?
That's correct. The police were on site on the day, but this is a contractor of ours, so it was up to Downers to work through that process. So there was an investigation done at their end and at our end. So yeah, our own health and safety protocols were followed.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good. Councillor Keast.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about the wet wipes, because they seem to be such an issue for local authority and generally waste disposal outfits across, if there are any private ones around the world. Is there any pushback to require the manufacturers to actually be removing the fact that they are flushable from their packaging? Is that because they're just a blight on society, really?
Personally, I agree with that sentiment 100%. There's been a lot of work done internationally, in Australia in particular. They're taking these manufacturers to task. You might be surprised at the size of these companies. They're some of the most profitable companies in the world. They're massive, and it's not a simple thing to just legislate against these wipes. Otherwise, they would have been knocked on the head a long time ago.
Yeah, it is really about education and that pushback from an environmental perspective, and you know, the size of the company, they should be made to be responsible for the environmental effect. So yeah, I can see that local government probably, or yeah, we need to have a collaborative influence on the negativity of these things and make people aware. Exactly. Don't know where we go to get that effect going though, because it's not good enough.
Yep. Yeah,
especially if they're very profitable companies. There's no reason why they can't take the hit.
No, I agree with your comments. Councillor Owen is next. Councillor Duffy, I'll come to you.
Thank you. I just had a quick question about the assault that occurred. What I utterly agree, like that it's just unacceptable and we should have zero tolerance with those things. But I don't know if you know anything about the nature of the cause of the grievance. Was it purely like a random one-off, or is it a signal of something in the community that wider community are upset about, or is there any reason for us to look into that further?
I could probably brief councillors at a workshop, maybe the better option, Bill.
I think so, yeah.
I'll brief councillors on the subject at a workshop. I only discussed this with Bill yesterday, so I'm happy to leave it where it is today and talk about it later.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Tong. Councillor Duffy, did you have a question?
It was just really a follow-up to what Councillor Keast was saying, because that was my thought as well. So I'm not sure, those wet wipes that are mainly on the market, are they manufactured in New Zealand? My wife's not close by, she'd probably know. And also, I mean, look what happened with plastic bags. I think there must be some ingredient in them that's the main offender. So I think we shouldn't just accept it. And I do think that's the level we might have the most success with, because education is only as good as the people that actually read the thing. And then in the heat of the moment, the toilet looks like the easiest place to get rid of it. That's what happens, I guess. So the human race survived for thousands of years without them, and I just think we shouldn't give up on that.
I don't think there's a suggestion that there is, but I think we've got to start educating our community and our members in our community. I think that's a good start, because that's where the push will come from, and I think that's one of the key areas to start with. Councillor Ford, did you have a question? No, you're all good. Any other comments, questions? I don't see any. Okay, thank you very much, Bill. So I'll move that report be received. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll go to item 7.4, Stewart Island Electricity Supply Authority. It's on page 53 of your agenda. And I'll ask Brendan Gray, it's your report. Would you like to speak to it, Brendan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. Under the revised delegated authority of the Services and Assets Committee, this report is seeking retrospective unbudgeted expense approval for the alternator replacement on Unit 5 of the CISA or Stewart Island Electricity Supply Authority. So I'll sort of paraphrase the report. Hopefully you've had a chance to read it, but in February this year, the alternator component of unit number 5 suffered a catastrophic failure due to moisture buildup and the infrequency of the use of that particular unit. It's a backup unit more than a frontline unit. It's used for when peak demand requires it to be used, or when one of the other 2 main units is being serviced. So unfortunately the failure occurred. We had some assessments that needed to be completed on the alternator itself to see whether it was repairable or not. That assessment came back and said that it was irreparable. So then we sought, or PowerNet on our behalf sought pricing for new alternator components. So that was taking place during the COVID-19 lockdown, and obviously we received the report from PowerNet advising the pricing that we had received for replacement alternator units. We ended up dealing with South Pacific Diesel Systems. There was an outstanding warranty claim or warranty issue in regards to one of the other generator units that we, fixed or sorted out at the same time. So they ended up giving us a reduction on that warranty amount. So reduced the purchase price of the new alternator down to 23,700 USD delivered to Bluff. So the new unit, I believe, is coming from, it's definitely coming from overseas. The new unit is going to be fitted with the most advanced moisture protection available on the market. From what I understand and talking with the PowerNet blokes, the alternator that failed had quite a basic moisture protection system in it. The new alternator that we are purchasing has the top of the line. It's a system called Total Plus. There is nothing better on the market. And if you read the specification under the options considered, it's what should have been season. It wasn't. So we're going for the whole hog, the full Monty system, and that should ensure that a failure of this kind does not occur again. So the unit has been ordered. Obviously, there's a time delay in getting the unit over from overseas. Obviously, we thought it was important that the unit is ordered so we can get that in motion. The last thing we want is a level of service drop in Stewart Island if there was a failure with units 3 or 4. Obviously, we don't currently have unit 5 as a backup. So yeah, I guess hopefully, as I say, you've had a chance to read the report there, and yeah, really just seeking approval for that retrospective unbudgeted expense approval for the purchase of the alternator. Happy to take any question.
Thank you, Brendan. That's appreciate that. I'll ask Councillor Ford to.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a point that it's 8 to 10 weeks since this fault was first identified, and the analysis of the work done at Wallace Murray was quite a little while ago. It doesn't give a lot of confidence in our system of how we manage these things. The part's still not anywhere in sight at this end, and consequently, you know, that in theory it could be 3 months before it's repaired. So ideally, that's not good enough. So some attention to how we manage those things would be preferred, in my view. And just make that point. If there's any explanation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. I can't offer an explanation on the time taken, perhaps for the analysis and a decision to be made. I've just taken the project over as far as the ordering, not so much the negotiation, but the ordering of the component itself. I can certainly find out and come back to you on that one if you like.
Thank you for that. I see Ashby, you would like to make a comment here. Please do so.
Yeah, I'll just firstly just to acknowledge the delay, and that it's not just to, I guess, reinforce what Brendan said. Brendan has been handling the project itself. The decision to act on that failure of the alternator falls on me. One of the aspects that and so I take responsibility for any delays in that timeline. I will just say one of the aspects of one of the aspects that needed to be closed out before we acted on it was a recommendation from PowerNet with a suite of options beyond the assessment of the failure of the unit itself, so that we could take a procurement decision forward. So they spent a little bit of time preparing a letter with 3 options and prices for that, and a clear recommendation, reasoned recommendation to proceed with one of those. And from a procurement point of view, I think that had some value. It also identified that warranty issue that Brendan mentioned as well, which allowed us to get a discount on that unit.
Okay, always lessons to be learned as you go through some of these processes. So I think we'll just acknowledge that. I see Councillor Douglas, you had your hand up as well. You have a question?
Look, it was just a very much an operational thing. You know, the way I read it was that the failure was perhaps due to underuse more than anything, and you know, perhaps going forward, you know, the plant needs to get a regular airing on a regular basis to make sure that everything's working properly before it's needed. And I don't want to teach you to suck eggs, but you know, perhaps you can put that in your operational manual.
Thank you for that comment. I suppose the only other comment that I have, that because it was a moisture content issue, that it surprised me that a piece of equipment that was put into that area, especially within the island, it has a reasonable amount of moisture content. That's part of the lower part of fuel, and we always get a bit of rain there. So it surprised me that we didn't have that covered off when we initially installed that particular piece of equipment. So, but it's good to know that, that the new machine has got that covered, and it would assist greatly, especially to what Councillor Douglas is saying, as well as to how the operational management of that plant is achieved in the future. Are there the Councillor Menzies? You have your Councillor Duffy. Do you also want to comment?
Yeah, just a question's come to mind. Do we have any insurance on those generators? any type of insurance?
Against failure, Councillor Duffy, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know on our farm we have like insurance cover for fusion of pumps, etc. So I'm just asking, is there any insurance at all on those generators? I'm not saying there should be, but I'm just saying, is there? And if there is, perhaps we should have a read of the policy and make sure that there's no option to make a claim of some sort.
You able to answer that, Brendan?
Not right now. It's potentially something worth exploring. Certainly, we've got the warranty options. The warranty cover. I wouldn't think that a warranty cover would cover something like a moisture ingress or something that we should have potentially thought about at the start or had covered at the start. But yeah, something perhaps to look into with Ashby outside this meeting.
Okay,
Absolutely.
that's good. Ashby, did you want to make a comment on that? You just put yourself on mute. Yeah.
Sorry, I was only going to echo what Brendan said there about separating out the warranty issue from mechanical insurance. And on the question of mechanical insurance, I don't think we do, but we'd have to scrutinise the cost benefit of that to make sure it was actually worthwhile. Essentially, if we're not insuring it, we're self-insuring it. And so we would hope to mitigate that risk by correctly specifying these components in the first place.
But Councillor Duffy certainly makes a very valid point. So that's something that you will look into and come back to us on that. Yep, thank you for that. Councillor Menzies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm just seeking some assurance, really. I understand from the report that we've gone with South Pacific Diesel because they have installed, we have purchased, or no, they've installed the generator replacements in recent years. Yet, is that the same provider that we've had the outstanding warranty claim with? Because the competitive price was what, $3,000 cheaper. So I think the warranty value was $4,950. So effectively, have we borne the cost of the extra $3,000 under the warranty claim? And does that mean that future warranty claims will be subject to an extended process as well? What confidence do we have?
Ashley, do you comment on that, please?
I think separate to the warranty claim, there was when I spoke with PowerNet about the different options there and the reason for their recommendation stood irrespective of the warranty because of the service they get from that provider and the relationship they have with it that can reduce costs, reduce costs down the line when it comes to installation as well as ongoing operations and maintenance.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Menzies. Any other questions for anybody? I don't see any. So could I have somebody that would move that we actually, I'll move the recommendations A to D on the report. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Ford has seconded that motion. So all those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, 7.5, we go to unbudgeted expenditure, car park at Wallace-Town Cemetery. It's on page 63 of your agenda. Mr. Mark Day, would you like to speak to your report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'll take this report as read, but I'll provide a little bit of background in terms of where this one in particular is coming from. At the end of the Wallace-Town CDA meeting, their last meeting, they indicated that they would like some works done moving forward. And as such, a report was provided to the Arete Community Board outlining those pieces of work. The Wareti Community Board indicated that they would like to progress some of this work to perhaps build some of the bridges between the two representative authorities after the representation review. So hence the reason for this particular report, which we have discussed with the community board, and they have provided email approval, both from the board chair and after canvassing the board members. So essentially we are looking for unbudgeted expenditure up to $20,000, which is what the previous Wallistown board indicated they were prepared to allow coming out of their reserve, to create a car park, an off-road car park at the Wallistown Cemetery. Currently at big funerals there, the overflow is out onto the road, which creates a health and safety issue. Now, there has been some preparation work done previously where a hedge was removed, and the site is unfortunately over at top of a hail site. That hail site is an old sheep dip, but what we are proposing to do is to not disturb the ground above that site and build on top of it. This was cleared with Environment Southland, and they said that that would be acceptable. So in terms of this report, it is still has to go to council because it's not in the LTP. So unfortunately, it's a recommendation to council, not a decision. So we'll have to amend the recommendation to reflect that. So happy to take any questions on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Are there any councillors that have any questions or comments on this one? Councillor Fraser, would you? Yes.
Yeah, I'm just more than happy to move this. It's certainly had lots of discussion locally and has the support of the Wallistown community, and I think will be a really positive thing to acknowledge the previous board's request and move forward in that relationship. And to get done, I was actually biking around Wallistown one day, and there was a funeral, and I saw the issue firsthand. So definitely a need. So fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. It certainly is one a very good initiative, and it also reflects the Wallistown community, and that they're prepared to take their funding out of their general reserve. So I think it's a very good initiative, and as you say, you've identified a need, and the community has identified a need, and it's good to see a paper like this come to us. Are there any other comments or questions that anybody may have? I've just had a message from Fiona. What are you saying there, Fiona?
Recommendation D should now say agrees to recommend to council the approval of the unbudgeted expenditure.
Oh, for sure. Yep. No, that makes sense. So are you happy with that amendment, Councillor Fraser?
I am.
Okay. Could I have are there any more questions or comments on this one? Councillor Menzies?
I was happy to second the motion. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. All right. No further comments. We have a mover, a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Good initiative. 7.6, we have the unbudgeted expenditure Lime Hills Community Centre Kitchen supper room refurbishment. Mark, you're back on the agenda.
As we alluded to before, we want to keep our works program moving forward, and this is one of the unbudgeted expenditure reports that will form part of that comment. Now this one has been around for a while as well. One of the main reasons for this not proceeding is because we couldn't agree to a scope of works. But with the new community board up and running and the councillors, we had a really good conversation with the hall committee out there, and we approved the scope. But unfortunately, that scope was obviously more than the sum that they had actually put aside for it. So what we are proposing to do here is to use the existing budget, also use the maintenance money that we have in for that facility for this year, and also a portion of the ward budget. So we are essentially looking for $10,241 from the Winton Wallacestown Ward Reserve. This proposal had some backing from the councillors who were part of that discussion around the scope of this project. So I'm actually happy to take any questions about the report.
Thank you, Mr. Day. And once again, it's good to read that our communities and councils are looking at reserve budgets to be able to support the financials for any initiatives that are being looked at. So that's a good aspect to see. Are there any comments or questions by Councillor Harper? Yeah. You're on mute there, Councillor Harper. There you go. No, you're back on mute again.
On mute. It doesn't want me to talk, does it?
Muted now.
Just push it once, George.
Rightio, are we on now? Yes, we are.
You're on
Yeah, a question for Mark or Mr. Day. The Lime Hills Hall, I guess, will have quite a bit of use, has it? Being out there.
Yeah, this is a very, very proactive committee, and they actually invite people from across the district to utilise their facility. So the enhancement to the kitchen area is going to certainly benefit not just the local community, but the district-wide community.
Very good to hear.
Thank you.
Councillor Fraser, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I was going to pre-answer that question that Councillor Harper just asked, which has just been answered. Really proactive out there. They're doing some really creative, innovative things, and they're bringing people into their community, particularly through the rugby season, and they're doing some great stuff. So yeah, it was one of those facilities that's being used well, that's being used wider than just the local community, and so hence why we thought it was worthy of really supporting.
That's
So
good,
again,
good comment. So I have one question. That what's the exterior of the building like? What's the rest of the building like?
The rest of the building is fine. It's been kept up. The maintenance on that has been kept up. As I say, the issue with the kitchen was that we couldn't determine a scope of works. It just kept on moving. So having that conversation with the committee on site so we could all see what needed to be done was well worthwhile.
Okay. So does it include the appliances and that sort of thing as well? They're all going to be upgraded?
Yes.
Good. Any other comments or questions from anybody? I don't see any other. So could I have a mover for these recommendations, please? Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Do I have a seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we go to item 7.7 on page 71. Fort Rose, Otato Road seal widening tender. Could I ask Rob Hayes to present his report, please? Rob?
Hartley's presenting on behalf of Rob.
Okay, Hartley, your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good day, councillors. I'll be presenting on behalf of Rob. So the Fort Rose Otato seal widening was a project we put out to tender early in the year, and we received significantly higher tender prices than anticipated. On that basis, council requested that we did a bit more work on it around NZTA funding and a bit more cost benefit analysis. We did engage with the NZTA about additional funding, but the two key requirements for additional funding from NZTA was around the net present value or benefit cost ratio being that criteria being met, as well as the strategic alignment. Unfortunately, because of the project value and that strategic alignment, both those criteria need to be met to be considered for further investment from the Transport Agency. And as a result, we've come up with these, or narrowed down to these three options for the committee to consider. The first is just to effectively proceed with minimal maintenance and leave the road as it is and carry out the planned resealing this coming season. The other option is to still work within the original budget and adjust the scope, so still achieve some improvements, but not, and that'll be out to 6.2 meters in seal width, not the original intended width, which is closer to the 7-meter width, with additional widening. The third option is to still proceed with the full project, but for council to effectively fund 100% of its share above the $1 million mark, which doesn't attract the which is a component that doesn't attract the NZTA funding. So those are the three options. The dollar values that we've put in there around the additional cost is effectively the net present value. So it's actually using the tender price received or the lowest tender price received. That actually, from a net present value perspective, shows a benefit of almost $600,000. So that's what those numbers, that additional cost is actually trying to demonstrate. So when looking at future maintenance required, reseals over a 30-year period, actually doing the seal widening when adjusted scope and seal widening to 6.2 meters comes out as the longer term preferred option from an economic analysis. I'll leave it at that, but happy to take any questions around that or any clarifications if required.
All right, I think it's one to be opened up. I see Councillor Harper had his hand up, and so did Councillor Douglas. So, Councillor Harper, you're.
Yep. Hartley, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What actually is the traffic flow on this road, and how many clients does it actually serve? How many ratepayers?
Thank you. In terms of the number of ratepayers, I'm not sure exactly of how many ratepayers. I suppose we don't, when we're looking at that, it's not, because it's a through road and not the likes of a no exit road, we do have through traffic, and it does form part of that alternative coastal route which links up with Curio Bay. So we tend to look at it more from our road hierarchy perspective. Our highest hierarchy that we have is a primary collector road, then down to a secondary collector road. And this falls in that secondary collector road, or as we've discussed with our pavement rehabilitation, it falls into the category of roads or sealed roads that we would continue to maintain and invest in. It probably doesn't give the answer in terms of exactly how many ratepayers or vehicle numbers. I think it does tend to fluctuate during the tourist season or non-tourist season because of that link to alternative coastal route in places like Waipapa Point and Slow Point. I can find it. We do have that data handy. I just don't have it off the top of my head.
Thank you for that. I suppose the question I have several, but I'll continue to open up. I do have one question I want to put to you, Hartley, is that by not widening the road, is there a safety issue here?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, there's a safety benefit to widening the road, because it does mean, even if we can get it out to that 6.2 metre width, because that does allow for the option of delineating, putting edge lines and having 3 metre lane widths. So there will be a safety improvement by even going to 6.2 metres.
Yeah.
Beyond the safety aspect, there's also a maintenance benefit, because the narrower the road, especially with heavy vehicle activity, we do tend to have a lot more edge breaks, so therefore maintenance costs, and those, the net present value or benefit cost calculations take that into account over, and we've looked at it from a 30-year period. So we have considered those options in terms of those calculations, and hence why still investing the money in achieving that 6.2 metre seal width will still have an overall benefit.
I think that's part of the key to it as well, because you're going from 5.8 to 6.2. So that does create that additional safety benefit as well. But I'll open it up. Councillor Douglas, I see you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Hartley, could you just step us through the process that determines the net present value? You know, I could say this is for new councillors, but some older councillors might just need reminded of the process, and how sometimes, as in this case, you can finish up with a negative net present value.
So as I indicated, we've looked at it over a 30-year period, and we've considered what maintenance costs are currently identified on that section of road, and the ongoing predicted maintenance costs over that period, as well as any other work that's required, like our reseals, and we've added in those costs and what's in of the various options, so the capital costs of widening, the ongoing maintenance costs, and then looked at there's a discount factor, I suppose, that gets applied to it, which considers if I took that money today and spent it on that road versus taking that money and investing it somewhere else and using that money in 30 years' time to upgrade the road, what does that look like? And that's what we're trying to compare. So it's trying to, hopefully that sort of explains without getting too technical about it. But that's the basic principles of it. To see, is it worth investing today or at a later date? And if you invest today, how much should we be investing?
And just to follow up, so who does that work? Do we get a consultant to conduct that work for us?
In this case, we engaged a consultant to do the work for us, but it is a standard. There's some standard templates and information that goes into that. And we do, on that, we do rely or look at the information council has on hand around the expected maintenance costs throughout the likes of our alliances and what we've actually got programmed on our books for maintenance costs.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Hartley. Any other questions? Councillor Duffy. Oh, and I see Councillor Keast, you'll follow Councillor Duffy, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points. One is, I wonder if it was being tendered now, what different prices might be given fuel cost changes, etc. But I guess our tender process is at such a stage that that's too late to be worrying about that. Just as far as it goes, we own the farm right beside that road, and I lived down there for 5.5 years, so I'm very familiar with it. And I drove a tractor over it a couple of years ago and was pretty horrified at the deterioration on the edge of the road. At the current 5.8 metres, it is dangerously narrow. The question about who it serves, there's an extensive farming area right down through there. There's a lot of stock trucks, and there's at least 2 dairy farms, and mixed in with a whole heap of camper vans. Of course, tourism's taken a knock, but the tourism in that area was always 70% domestic prior to the lockdown. And so when New Zealanders start travelling again, while I expect numbers will be reduced, there would still be a significant number of camper vans, which are pretty wide in themselves, using that road. And I mean, it's just about reality. I would love to see it widened out to the 7 metres, but it's just not a economic option in the current climate. So I certainly support option 2, but it would be a mistake to leave it to do maintenance and leave it at the width it's at, I believe.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. I certainly agree with your comments. It's, the future utilisation needs to be considered, and also consider our current situation as well. Councillor Keast.
Thank you, Councillor Crover. Yeah, I'd just reinforce Councillor Duffy's remarks there. I've had quite a bit of feedback from the locals, and even driving that road myself. The edge brake, when I'm just in a car, the edge brake is dangerous really, and it must cost us a lot to repair it each year. But that local feedback is there is a lot of concern about the width of the road and the meeting of vehicles, trucks going either way or with camper vans, and but also the tractors and trucks generally. So yeah, I think that the medium line here of 6.2 metres would be is the way to go. The just wondering what safety improvements what others would be a priority. Question for Hartley probably.
Thank you. So if I understand the question correctly, is would we have other safety priorities across the district?
No. What
safety along that section of road?
The report actually makes reference to additional safety on that particular section of the road would be implemented. So I think Councillor Keast would like an understanding of what those other safety initiatives would be on that particular part of the road.
Yeah. So, okay, thank you for clarification. So it is the likes of what I've already mentioned. By achieving that 6.2 metres, we can actually achieve edge lines, which the road doesn't currently have. So that's one of the safety benefits. But also the likes of your intersections, if the budget allows, is actually sealing back on those, and then that allows or prevents gravel migration occurring onto the sealed or the main road, particularly for the likes of your motorcyclists around corners, and so it provides those sorts of safety benefits or reduces the risk to road users. So those are some of the benefits we did or we'd gain from this. Just on the crash aspect, when we were looking at the numbers for the benefit cost, we did actually have a look at the crashes along that section of road, but there wasn't a obvious trend or specific location as we have or do get around other parts of the district. So we couldn't, in some cases, as we did with sealing of the coastal, the unsealed portion of the coastal route, there was a significant number of crashes, and that bolstered the business case for it. Unfortunately, in this case, we didn't have sufficient numbers or in a recurring location to bolster the numbers from a dollar value perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Keast?
Yes, thank you. Really, I hadn't heard, maybe only heard of touching mirrors on trucks and things, not so much crashes, but it was really just the concern from the locals, voiced concern as to how narrow it seemed.
Okay, valid point. Any other, Councillor Duffy?
Just if I could comment on the crashes, I don't recall hardly any, but I do know of a lot of near misses, and I've been involved in one or two of them myself.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, I'm prepared to move the recommendations A to D. Do I have a seconder for? Thank you, Councillor Keast. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Right, we'll have a break for morning tea. We'll come back at, say, 1:45. Everybody happy with that? 15-minute break? Sure. We'll see at 1:45. Thanks very much.
Well, you are a good fund, yeah. You're a good fund with. Mm-hmm. 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 Good. Good boy. Yes, it's dogs, huh? Two goodies. Two goodies. Oh my God, two goodies. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Don't know. Oh, no, too nice not to. Trudy is. Are your pants on? Remember that on TV?
Oi, we're recording and we're back online.
What's time? Who are we waiting for, guys? Mr. Harper?
Councillor Harper, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Harper's back. Councillor Ford, where are you?
Video start.
Okay, let's I'll make it 1:45. So we will restart. I'm sure Paul will come on as soon as he can. So the next item is alternative coastal route. 7.9. We've got that right, have I? Yeah, 7.9.
7.8, road operations report.
Sorry, yes, no, I've jumped ahead. Thank you very much. Yep. 7.8, and I'll ask Rob Hayes to speak to that, and that'll be Hartley here, and he's going to do that instead. So thank you, Hartley.
Thanks, Chairman, councillors. Before I start, just for the previous report, the question was raised around the traffic volumes. So we've got a range along that route at between 320 to 370 vehicles per day as an average section of the road.
How many was that?
320 to 370
a day.
A day as an average. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the next report covers the operations, road operations across the district. With COVID-19, there has been a reduction in the amount of activity, and by and large, we've been operating with a skeleton, or the contractors have been operating with a skeleton crew, attending to activities such as rubbish bin collections and those works that are safety related. So any requests for services that we may have received, and between council, contract managers and our suppliers, we've been the main focus was keeping an eye on the network and limiting works that were occurring. We did find that the network held up reasonably well for the most part, but towards the end of lockdown 4, particularly the gravel roads had started showing some deterioration. And with the shift down to level 3, yeah, there's definitely been a focus around some of the winter maintenance activities, some cleaning, street sweeping, etc., that are particularly associated with the change in weather conditions. As pointed out in paragraph 7, this has had an impact on our expenditure, even though with the February flooding, there was an increase in expenditure in March. Yeah, that last week was sort of prime weather for doing roadworks when we went into lockdown. So it definitely has had an effect, and a bit like what was reported through the project report. With month end in particular, we'll be assessing those impacts and see what level of impact it has had and where we're likely to end up for year end. But also, what ability do we have to ramp up? I'll pick on grading as an activity. Is the ability to bring on additional grading resources to catch up on any lost maintenance, to bring our network back up to a suitable level. Coming months, some activities will have to be particularly around our sealed road, like the likes of dig out stabies. If we don't have a sufficient break in the weather, they'll have to be postponed to next season. But that's pretty minimal from a maintenance activity perspective. the greatest impact we've probably had as a result is around our resealing program. We, based on our council's level of service and KPI, we expect to, it looks like we would have achieved 90%, 95% of the LDP program that was indicated. And that's just because of that loss of the last week or so from COVID. But we don't have any, we haven't identified any critical at-risk sites that, yeah, we can't manage over the winter period until next season. So we'll look at carrying some of that work forward. Other works that have, without repeating too much of what some of the project team, some of the other works that we have managed to complete, also substantially complete, is the likes of the Mararoa Road Bridge. We've included a few photos of that bridge in the report. And the other work that did actually continue for the first few weeks during COVID-19 was relating to Piano Flat, where there was damage to a bridge abutment. There's also been some photos included in the report around that. Just because of the condition, we had to progress that works, because if we did have a flood event, then we risked further damage and potential loss of the bridge. That was the only project that we carried on to a stage that we felt was safe should we have another flood event. Happy to leave the report at that and take any questions.
Thank you, Hartley. And look, it's really noted that we had a double hit here. We had the floods, and there's some significant damage there that we've been attending to. And now, of course, with COVID-19, that has certainly had an impact on our ability to fulfill all our requirements. But it's good to see that some of this work actually did carry on. That protection work carried on, especially through some of the rivers, looking at some of those photos, and also some of that bridge repairs. So it was good to see that even under those, let's say, extreme circumstances, we've still been able to continue with some of those projects and some of that work. And very pleasing to see that flooding repair work, because as you say, it had a danger of getting worse if we didn't fix it straight away. So good to note. So I'll open it up for any questions or any comments. Anybody? Councillor Keast.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kramer. That I'll just find my spot here. That was a question about a comment in the FOVO Alliance report about Evans Road and Scrubby Hill Road bridges, I think it was, not being included.
Might just want a little bit more clarification there, please, Councillor Keast.
Yeah, I'll just ask anybody if anybody else wants. I'll just find the exact place on the page. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll wait for the question.
In the meantime, has anybody else got a question or a comment? Yeah, Councillor Harper. Unmute.
Yes, Councillor Kramer, thank you. Just to comment or follow up there from what Hartley was saying there before, that and the gravel and stuff, with the latest announcement from government, it looks like we're going to have a relaxation of, well, maybe not a relaxation, but a more streamlined approach to the resource consenting. And I know one issue was removal of gravel from rivers. I'm quite sure that Hartley will be quite relieved that some of this, I can recall the ex-councillor Dillon being on about this probably 4 or 5 times a year. And of course, nothing ever happened. And the same Councillor Kramer up your way with the Upuck Bridge. So maybe this is going to be a bit of a help along the way, and it might also reduce a few long-term costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Wish to make any comment, Hartley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there will be opportunities. I know with the likes of even along the state highway, considering they don't maintain any gravel roads, if there's material as a result of, say, using the February flooding as an example, that does become available, they have been in contact with us. So yes, the more of that material around bridges that has to be removed for ongoing maintenance and effectiveness of those bridges that we can get at little to no cost, definitely a benefit to the ratepayers and looking at reducing overall maintenance costs in our unsealed network. So look forward to that.
Okay, that's certainly, as Councillor Harper has identified, that's certainly been an issue for a number of years. That has been raised on numerous occasions with regards to extracting gravel out of the rivers, especially underneath the bridges, and some bridges only operating at half or 2/3 of their capacity, which creates some problems in itself that we all know of. So anyway, Councillor Keast, did you wish to continue with your question?
Yes, I've found the spot on the page. Under the heading progress and items, bridge repairs, budget in there, and it's got the comment to the side, the dollars exclude Evans Road, Scrubby Hill, routine program now received. What does that actually mean?
So what that is for the likes of Evans Road, where the bridge was temporarily closed, and we carried out we did end up carrying out maintenance activity. Those funds came out of the roading budget for structural maintenance, which is a budget outside of what was approved for the Alliance maintenance. Their budgets tend to cover more general maintenance, things like painting of handrails, deck clearing, etc., not the more major activities, and we manage that on a district-wide basis rather than per alliance. So that's what that comment relates to, is that effectively it's come from a different pot of NZTA/council approved budget rather than the alliance budget.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question for Hartley in relation to McLean Road and Garston that was quite significantly damaged in the flood. I was just wondering if there are any advancements in any information or any plans around that.
Thank you for the question. So there are still a few jobs as a result of the floods that we're progressing, McLean Road being one of them. We've had some aerial drone imagery obtained since we've moved from level 4 to level 3 to help us with the assessment and determination of what sort of options are available for us to potentially reopen that road or look at alternative longer term solutions. Because my understanding is that road has been susceptible to washouts in the past. So we don't want to be throwing good money after bad. So I want to come up with a workable solution, and if and whatever that solution may be, present that back to council potentially, because there may be some reasonable dollar value involved with that, $250,000, $300,000 on a gravel road, and yeah, so we just need to consider those longer term implications. We don't want to be putting that sort of money and then in 12 months time have to reinvest again. There's a few other jobs I tout out to a Tappery slip site is another one that we've back on the radar and progressing quite rapidly following lockdown. That was also worsened by the floods. So there's still a few jobs out there directly relating to the flooding that we haven't been able to progress, but they're the larger type jobs and a bit more complex.
Thanks, Hartley. Do you have a sort of rough timing on when you think that information might be available, or a set sort of direction for coming back to us at the council meeting?
Sorry, I missed the last bit. Our intention is to come back to the June meeting, if I heard you correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Owen, did you have a question? No, okay. Don, hello. Yes.
Yes, I could hear you, but I couldn't actually get back in to see you. So anyway, here we are. Just a question. We've made good progress with bridges. I hear the Cooks Road one being done at Kapuka South, which got some positive publicity, and the Monowai one, etc. I'm just wondering, Hartley, the bridge tenders that come in, are they, like at one point they were sort of coming in at massively above what we estimated? Has that settled down now?
Hey, Mr. Chair, yes, we've seen some good prices come back with the last one, particularly the Monowai Canal Bridge replacement came in under our estimate. The design build bridge packages, they were pretty much on par, but you did right, some of those tenders before that were coming in a little bit higher than what we were estimating. So there does seem to have been a bit of a swing. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that trend remains over the coming months and effectively see a bit of a stabilization of prices.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. It mightn't be good to talk about swing and bridges in the same sentence.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Right, Councillor Don Myers, you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Hartley. Just a quick question on page 84. You've got the here, and I don't know if I can quite read them that well. There's one saying noxious spraying on all roads. I was wondering if you could just clarify for me what that's telling us.
On page 84. So as part of the routine maintenance activities, we carry out 2 lots of spraying. One's bird spraying, and the other one is noxious spraying. And the noxious spraying is addressing pest plants on the side of the roads that are identified through Environment Southland. They've got a pest management list of plants or noxious plants, and those are the ones we target across the district as part of that spraying. So, of course, yeah.
And along these roadsides, there's quite often ditches and water tables. Would it be reasonable to make the assumption that some of this chemical ends up in the waterways along these roads?
There's always a possibility of it. In terms of the verge spraying, we limit that spraying to around 100 to 200 millimeters off the edge of the seal. That tends to be the sealed road. Even the unsealed roads, you may be talking a half a meter. And we have the buffer of in a lot of cases, grass on the edge of the road. And that one of the purposes of that is it acts as a bit of a filtration. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because it can impact on the road performance because it holds moisture. But there's that environmental aspect to it. In terms of the noxious spraying, if there's no need to be spraying because there aren't any noxious plants, then we won't be spraying those particular areas. So it's not just a blanket spray drive down the road and just keep the nozzle going type approach. There has been previously discussions around alternative methods. And I know